who have joined us this evening for a very, very important workshop. Helen Keller once said, once we have enjoyed the things that we have once enjoyed, we can never lose. All that we deeply love becomes a part of us. And during this COVID times, when we have seen a loss of our loved ones, um, Indian Psychiatric Societies, along with the NGO subcommittee, were wondering what do we do about this grief and loss. And the pioneers in the field, Mind Temple and Mother Trust, who were already working a lot with grief counseling, reached out to us, and we were so glad for this collaboration that we could kind of, reach out to a bigger audience, train a bigger number of mental health professionals so that we can reach out to the maximum number of people possible. Bombay Psychiatric Society, Dr. Priyanka Mahajan and Dr. Avinash D'Souza have been also very kind to collaborate during this meeting. Before we really start the meeting, I know that our president of IPS, Dr. Gautam Sai, is here. I would just ask him to say a few words before we start the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Cheryl. At the outset, I must give my thanks to other collaborators like Bombay Psychiatric Society, Dr. Avinash D'Souza and Dr. Priyanka Thakur as the president and secretary respectively, and the Dr. Mind Temple and the other trust, and as well as it is a great initiative by the convener of the committee, Dr. Shedil Jan, and chairperson Dr. Amarnath Mollik, and co-chair Dr. G. Shaminathan, Dr. Hemendra Phukan, our one of the senior most psychiatrists as an advisor, and EC coordinator is Dr. Vishalinta. Today the topic of workshop is the grief support group experimental workshop. It is a fantastic and which is very much needed in COVID period, because there are lots of grief and how to tackle, how to manage it. In fact, it is very important and very important to train the other mental health professionals also. So I am confident that Dr. Ashish Thakur will definitely enlighten us, and really great that I have seen that Dr. Fabian Almeida and Dr. G. Shaminathan will be the chairpersons of this society. Definitely this session will be very great learning session to all of us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Over to Dr. Fabian.
Thank you, sir. We do not want to kind of, spend a lot of time with the introductions. We want to get everybody started on the workshop. For that, I would want to kind of introduce our two eminent chairpersons for the day. We have Dr. Swaminathan, who is a consultant psychiatrist and former head of department of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar Medical College, Bangalore. He is also the chairperson of the NGO and patient carer subcommittee. He has held many positions in the IPS. He has won many awards. What is special about him is that he's very, very active with all the NGOs associated with mental health, and not only active with his knowledge but also with his time. So thank you, sir, for agreeing to chair this session. Our next chairperson is Dr. Fabian Almeida. Dr. Fabian Almeida is a psychiatrist, counselor, motivator. He's trained in Mumbai and UK. He wears many hats with absolute elaine. He is currently also coordinating a grief support group called Twinkle Twinkle, among the various other endeavors he's part of. I would like to hand over now the stage to the two chairpersons.
Yeah, I think it's my job to introduce the topic. They have told me that I have to do it in 2 lines. It might be difficult, but then bereavement groups are something which is of need in this hour of pandemic. And bereavement groups have two responsibilities. One is to ensure that the people who come to the bereavement group suffer much less. Their suffering gets alleviated. And the second thing is that it prevents the complicated grief, which is when a lot of these people might require much more professional help in the form of going to a psychiatrist. People would much easier love to be in a bereavement group, basically because it is more acceptable to them. The costs are less. They vibe well with the other members of the group. And therefore, I think this has been a wonderful initiative started by them. And what we are going to hear today is what is the experience they have had over time in this pandemic. And that is something which we are going to learn. It is not going to be from someone who's going to just talk from throat to his hat, but from someone who's been there and done that and gone through all the issues which are related to it. And hopefully, this will be a wonderful learning experience. I have listened to Ashish Thakur last time, and I was very impressed with the passion with which he has approached the subject. And I'm very glad to be here as chairman. But please remember, I'm just going to be a very avid listener to whatever you're going to say. Welcome, Ashish Thakur, to our thing. And it's very gratifying that our IPS NGO subcommittee has collaborated with you, and we are going to have this session. Thanks a lot.
Grateful, Dr. Swaminathan. I'm humbled.
Yes, so thanks to his flawless presentation last time, we are already familiar with Ashish Thakur, his MA in Counselling from the New York University, and many such milestones, having worked with various national and international NGOs. But we also know that he has contributed his expertise to two books by Dr. Anjali Chabria, one being Death is Not the Answer and Surviving During a Pandemic. And a little more about this fine gentleman, his belief in the Buddhist philosophy that every life is precious and worthy of respect is the common denominator that guides his approach to his psychotherapeutic work. His passion for his work in the field of grief, loss, bereavement, suicidology comes from the neglect that he has long seen and experienced in these critical areas as part of his own personal and professional narrative. Well, he cribs, I'd like to do absolutely nothing, and yet lands up doing so much even on a holiday. But another side to this grief therapist is that he is a hardcore humorist. A fan of Charlie Chaplin, believes that the human ability to humor oneself is an amazing self-care strength. Let's go over to Ashish Thakur for more about grief work.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fabian, Dr. Gautam Saha, Dr. Swaminathan, Dr. Fabian, Dr. Cheryl, and all my seniors over here. I'm humbled to be here, grateful to be here, to be able to share with you our work in the area of grief, loss, and bereavement in this period that I call AC, which is after COVID. For me, it would be incomplete if I didn't thank my professional mentor, Dr. Anjali Chabria, who's been so encouraging consistently, and Dr. Anand Parihar of the Mother Trust. I'm going to begin today by reading out to you a statement made by a participant in one of our grief support groups. This, of course, is being shared with her consent without naming her. We went to the hospital together. I came back by myself. It broke me to have to walk away by myself, to leave. How could I leave? And yet I had to. It meant I was forced to live a life without them. I had to force acceptance. Whatever that meant, I myself did not know. So what we have experienced and what we have seen through the grief support groups that we have been running is that there is this massive grief revolution in the AC period, which is after COVID. It did not have to be. And what we have lost is not only people, but we've also lost the human platform, need, want, the basic human instinct to be able to grieve without hindrance. Because we haven't just lost people in the present, we've lost them in the future as well. We've lost them in everything that we are going to do, achieve in the future. And like Dr. Swaminathan said, a grief, loss, and bereavement support group is not there to solve or resolve. Because there is no solving or resolving when it comes to death, when it comes to grief, loss, and bereavement. A grief support group is space, to offer space, space to breathe, space to ventilate, space to let it out. A safe space is an opportunity to connect with oneself and with the inner thoughts, feelings, and emotions, as well as that of the co-members of the group. The world is filled with things which are connected to grief. One of our participants said, I wake up in the morning and I have to pour only 1 cup of coffee, not 2. How do I reconcile with that? Another said, I didn't have the chance to say goodbye. The last time I met her was not supposed to be the final goodbye. It was not supposed to be the last time I held her hand and then to see her at the funeral. Using that as a backdrop, I'm going to very quickly run through what we presented last time, which was how do you go about forming a grief group? However, that's going to be a very minimal part. And if you need information on that, you could email Dr. Cheryl John, and she'll be happy to email those inputs to you. Our focus today is going to be on the actual support group in reality. And while we've done our best to simulate from our learning, there may be so much that you may have to offer in terms of thoughts, comments, observations. What would you do differently, or questions? And we have these 4 short film segments, which will show you certain aspects, certain critical aspects of the grief support group. After every segment, we invite you to comment, to state, to observe, because this needs to be 2 ways. Because both you and I are committed to the lives of people grieving. And while there may not be resolution or a solution, the attempt to empower them to carry their grief better is what a grief support group strives for. So, like you see on your screen, a grief support group, common connection brings isolation to an end. Safe space where people who have lost a loved one comes together, non-judgmental, supportive, and safe environment. Critical part that you will see in the film, how do I validate and normalize emotions? Of course, because there are people, there are always group dynamics. Size less than 8, there's a shared cause of grief, possible even mix of gender, similar age groups if possible, 6 to 8 weeks, 1 hour per week. The intake interview after you have sent out the communication, critical aspect. Explain what a support group is, ascertain their expectations, Assured confidentiality, the basis on which a support group is formed. Deteriorate logistical aspects, dates, duration, internet connection, convey the significance of commitment for 7 sessions, ask the potential group members if they have questions, also ascertain would they be suitable for a group setting or maybe individual psychotherapy counseling. Float out an SOP and a consent form, very critical to get this back, assuring confidentiality, privacy, dignity, no violence or intimidation, not to come to the group under the influence of alcohol or substance, avoid relationships in the group, avoid gossip, attendance, internet connectivity, uniqueness, individuality, termination. Critical aspect, participant must be of legal age. The group is a support group, not psychotherapy. Once the group has commenced, we retain the structure of the group without allowing people to join in, as this can disrupt group dynamics. Process content of the group cannot be liable in court of law. It's an important factor. And facilitators must be mindful of conflicting interests, as in knowing the participant personally, having 2 family members of the same group of the same family in the same group, and addressing transference and counter-transference. Now, a very critical question quickly that comes up is, so what do we do in these groups? And I want to state this point over here. Grief is like amoeba. It changes, it metamorphosizes minute to minute, sometimes hour to hour, day to day. However, for you as a facilitator, you need a broad highway to follow. And while I'm not in complete agreement with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief, because for me, grief is like amoeba. There are a million stages involved in every stage. For the sake of conducting this group, it's a great parameter to follow, which is, an introductory session, a session which is themed around the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and closing session. However, please know that every single support group will eventually take its own form, even though you may think this may be the theme of the group. Critical element, which you will see in the film, which is the role of the facilitator. I'm quickly running through them: mirroring, validating, stating, silence, focus on the participants, guard against counter-transference. Attributes for the facilitator: setting group expectations during a directive approach, modeling and reflecting behavior, implying and addressing ruptures, fractures, and tension in the group, checking biases and getting feedback. For those supporting a group for the first time, recommended interventions. I'm sorry for your loss. How are you doing with all this? What can I do for you now? I'm here and I want to listen. What is the hardest part for you? Take all the time you need. I will call you again tomorrow. What is it for you right now? Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see is a real life portrayal of everything that you heard here on. The opening session, mirroring, and validation in the next 4 minutes of this film segment. After which we will take on observations, comments, questions, responses. Please feel free to share what would you do differently. Please know we don't know it all. We're learning as we're doing as well.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here this evening to the opening session of this grief support group. I know from what our conversations have been, it's been a hard journey for each one of you. And we're so grateful that you've allowed yourself to be part of this path that we're going to take for the next 6 or 7 Saturdays. for allowing yourselves to be vulnerable to process your own journeys of losing this loved one. So while we've spoken individually and we know each other a little bit, I guess this is the first time as a group that we're coming together. I would be grateful if we could begin with introducing each other by name.
My name is Rohan. I'm 20.
My name is Vinita. I'm 42 years old.
My name is Shariksha.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves so that each one of us knows the other's name. I'm going to introduce myself once again. My name is Ashish and I am a psychologist at my temple, and I am going to be the facilitator for your group along with my co-facilitator.
The loss, although it's been a month, it just hurts a lot. I can't stop thinking about it. It's like my thoughts are just stuck in a cycle on loop. It just hurts. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't work. It's too much.
Too much, Rohan?
Yeah,
Hurts?
it's endless. Will this ever stop?
Endless, Rohan.
It just goes on and on and on. Whether I try to go to work, whether I try to meet some friends, I can never get out of it. I'm just stuck.
I'm hearing you. Rohan, hurt, endless, stuck. How does that feel in this moment?
Heavy.
Heavy.
It's like there's a rock on my chest. And almost like someone's choking me, like my neck is really.
That sounds heavy.
It just feels very unfair, everything that happened. Why did it have to be me? Or everybody?
It sure is unfair.
Just feel very angry. I can't accept the fact that this has happened. People around me don't understand how I certainly feel right now.
And what I'm hearing is that you're feeling anger. And I want you to know that being angry is absolutely okay in this situation. Asking that question that you did a little while ago when you said, why me? That's absolutely fine for you to not only allow yourself to feel, but that it is okay to feel whatever it is that comes up in this journey of grief.
There are so many emotions. At times I feel very angry, at times I feel numb, at times I feel sad. It's just hard to understand, and it's hard for me. At times I feel guilty about feeling that.
So hard to understand, right? Such a mix of emotions, such a mix of feelings. And when you said that, it seemed that these feelings keep.
Nobody around me understands that. It's hard for them to know that why am I angry. Then it's not easy.
I'm sorry to hear that. How are you feeling right now when you're expressing what you're saying?
Anger.
What does anger feel within you right now?
I just want answers to the questions that I have. I want to know why. And that makes me angry because I know I'm never going to get those answers again.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thoughts, comments, responses, reactions, questions from that segment, which covered the opening session, instance of validating responses and mirroring responses. Anyone? I think there's Urvaja who has a hand up. Urvaja, do you have a question? Any comments before we move to the next segment?
No, Ashish, I do not have any questions.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, we're going to move to the next segment if there are no comments or questions. And a critical part of a group setting is it's a group and it's people. And even though they're together under a common platform or purpose of grief, there will be group dynamics. There will be a power struggle. There will be interaction, which has the potential to cause, different members to feel different things. Something that we have experienced in the group sessions, that at times there is this aspect of comparative grief. And it's innocent. This aspect of comparative grief is, at least my situation was not as bad as hers or his. Now that may make you land up feeling a little better. However, it may land up making the other person feel worse. How does one normalize this power dynamic? How does one take care of participants? How does one normalize communication after something like this? Let's have a look through the next segment.
Doing well, but just in the morning, he felt very blood pressure. I just remember that day when he was actually hospitalized, and it was all of a sudden. He was doing well, but just in the morning, he felt very blood pressure, and we had to hospitalize him. I think that was the last time I remember seeing him, not even speaking to him. And he was there not even for 3 hours, and we got the news of his demise. Being in the middle of COVID, we weren't really allowed to go to the hospital or be there for the last rites. And I just remember not, seeing him for the last time, and that still haunts me. I thought I could have just heard his voice, or at least, I just don't remember his face, how it looked. And I was alone. I had nobody next to me. I had nobody to support me while all of this was happening, because people were scared. Everybody was so selfish. They did not feel like coming and standing by me. They were just looking after their own families.
At least I had my family with me. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone.
I'm really glad to hear that you had your family. However, please know that each person's journey is unique. And each person's journey, paths, situations, circumstances are unique to their own. There is nothing like comparative grief. Sure, we use someone else's situation to make ourselves feel better. But I would advise we do not do that in the group. Because then what I'm doing is I'm using the grief of another group member to make myself feel better. However, I end up making the other group member feeling worse off. Do you have a response to that, Samiksha?
I'd like to apologize.
How are you sitting with that, Vinita, when you heard Samiksha say what she said? You're smiling.
As you said, everybody's journey of grief is very unique. I relate to that.
What did you feel when Seleksha compared grief and compared situations? What did you feel in that moment? My heart sank. I cannot even imagine what you may have felt.
Felt unfair. Why?
And again, Seleksha, this is not to put you in a spot, but just for us to continue this journey as a group together towards the path of healthy grieving. Isn't that what you feel right now?
It feels heavy.
And I want you to know that if you feel the need for us to chat on the one-on-one after group, please feel free. Same goes for you, Seleksha. If you feel the need for us to chat on what I responded with, please do that. So what we saw, ladies and gentlemen, was a power dynamic, innocent, well-intended. However, comparative grief is a reality in every group that I have either conducted or supervised. What is equally critical is that we as a society are extremely uncomfortable with awkward conversations. However, one of the most critical, aspects that a facilitator is responsible for is to normalize uncomfortable, is getting comfortable with the uncomfortable for the facilitator as well as for the group participants, to be able to ensure conversation takes place about that which may be uncomfortable. And another aspect that we're uncomfortable with as a society is silence and tears. Very often when I say we, I don't refer to all of you on the call, but just generically, we often, when there is silence, we want to jump and say something because that silence is so uncomfortable. Or we listen not to listen and feel, but we listen to hear. And when someone cries, sometimes the focus is not what is the person feeling and therefore crying, but it is how can I get that person to stop crying? And that uncomfortable few moments pass. So I just want to, before we go on to the next segment, ask if there are any comments or any questions on what you saw on normalizing awkwardness, power dynamics, group dynamics. Anyone? Dr. Fabian, I mean, you've been conducting a group. Has this come up in your group? It would be great to have you sort of share that.
Yes, just a sec. Yes, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is definitely something that we are getting used to, allowing people to grieve in their own way during the group and giving them that onus to take it forward with a pause that is required. And although we do it in our MSCs with our patients, with our clients, in our clinics, in a group setting, it is probably so far in all our support groups, we don't let a dull moment pass by. We allow people to understand, grasp, and maximize the involvement to their advantage. But we are learning that grief support groups are sometimes in stark contrast to what we've been doing in all other support groups. So
absolutely,
this does
absolutely
come across as a lesson well learned.
Absolutely. Thank you for adding on there. Dr. Cheryl, you have a hand up. Is that correct?
Yes, Ashish. I was just wondering, when the other client kind of talked about how she was in a better of place as compared to the other, that comparison, and when we kind of interrupt and ask them not to do that, does it kind of cause problems for them later? Like, they feel offended more and then they don't follow up. Does that happen? That, okay, you kind of sidelined me, you didn't allow me to speak.
So
Just
what I want to
wondering.
point, sure. So what I want to point out to you is that in the interest of time, the silence allowed that may have been cut, in the film. However, after Samiksha said, at least I had my family, and at least I was not so bad, one would allow silence to set in, for the group to sit with that and then respond to Samiksha saying, talking about comparative grief. If you also noted at the end of that segment, one offered both of them the space and the platform to speak to the facilitator individually if there was any leftover residue, because you wouldn't want them to sort of leave the group setting even after carrying something that is unresolved that may cause, a barrier to their healthy grieving process. Uh, I just want to state from one of our support groups that we had, there was consistent, comparative grief happening session after session. And, we gently corrected in the first, we did correct it in the second. And in the third, we ourselves took the initiative to have a one-on-one conversation to tell them, we know you experience gratitude by saying this. You feel fortunate and we're so happy for you. However, the sensitivity with which you say so, in terms of comparing, and because your reaction is, at least I did not, at least I had my family there. The at least, and words are so critical when it comes to grief support group. And Dr. Fabian, you may sort of know that the slightest sort of word here and there can cause a participant. And of course, we can't be perfect, but sort of just some things to keep in mind, um, is this aspect of comparative grief, because people don't realize, that what they're doing by saying, at least my situation was, is you're making the other person maybe feel a little worse off. If you also notice, we normalize the conversation by asking both of them. So Samiksha, how did you feel that I sort of, I didn't mean to put you in a corner, but I spotlighted this, as well as if you saw the other participant was a little embarrassed and she just smiled, because she didn't know what to say. And you sort of acknowledge, okay, you're smiling. Would you like to go into what is it that you're feeling? Dr. Cheryl, does that sort of briefly respond to you?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Ashish.
Thank you. Okay, let's see the next uncomfortable section, silence and crying.
Just feel so frustrated. Everyone keeps talking about what I should do, what I shouldn't do. And just so frustrated.
Yeah, mom's been asking me to get back to uni and take up summer courses, and it's just like, I don't feel like it. I got accepted to 2 internships. I was like, no, I cannot do this. I can't chug coffee and I can't, it's just too much for me. I just want to be in my room by myself. I can't keep getting pushed to do things. Go work out, go meet your friends, go study, go for your internship. I just can't.
It's hard, even I'm not able to figure things out. I mean, so much anger, so much frustration, I just feel like I could punch the wall on anybody who's in front of me. I just remember one of those days, we were planning for our trip. We thought COVID is getting a little better. And, it's been a year, by God's grace, we all are safe. So why not do something together? And, a week after that, the cases just went way above what we imagined, and so fast we did not even get the time to think what would happen. So we were also happy with each other. We did not have anybody else in the family. And when all this was happening, I felt so lonely. I felt like I won't be able to handle this now. I did not know how to see him. I was asked to visit the hospital when they informed me that they have to put him on ventilator because what if he's not there tomorrow? And I don't want to see him like this. I have happy memories with him. I don't want to see. That's not the last thing I want to see. I don't want to remember him like this. And now I regret it. I regret not going. I regret not seeing him for that one last chance that I had. How I wish I could have. How I wish I knew this was going to happen. But I know I can't go back now.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry for sharing. I do not know. It would be heavy.
I shouldn't cry.
You don't have to be sorry for sharing your grief, not for your tears, Rohan. Vinita, this is your space where you share freely and openly. Rohan, this is your space. If you need to cry, please allow yourselves without feeling any hold back.
Any thoughts, ladies and gentlemen? Tears and silence. As a society, we're uncomfortable with tears and silence. With the grief support group, you are going to have tears. There is going to be moments where participants would not like to speak. And I see, ma'am, Madhvi Rao, you have your hand up. Please feel free. Ma'am, you're on mute, please.
Yeah, sorry. So just my observation, when the group, when the speaker starts to cry, right? I think we should just let the silence and then let them cry out and then take it up, right? Because in
Absolutely.
this case, the others were crying. That's what just want to make sure.
Absolutely. So this was done on purpose. And I'm so glad you got on to that, because someone's sharing their story and that is triggering a response and a reaction in the other participants.
Right.
And then the participant who has shared suddenly begins to feel, oh my gosh, did I make them feel bad? Did I trigger something? And if you saw, she apologized.
Correct.
And then the normalization of the fact and reassurance, this is your safe space. This is where you do not have to hold back. Yeah. Ma'am, thank you so much for catching on to that, because this was done on purpose. And it's there in my presenter notes to point it out at the very end. Yeah. You're ahead of my game. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
So any other comment, question? I'm not able to see any other hands up. Yes, Dr. Fabian.
Yeah, if I can just share as of now, what we are doing is an online group. It's an online support group. So we are not having the physical presence. So this becomes pretty challenging, because most of the time we would have them have their videos off, and we do not really pressurize them to have their videos on and off. We make a request, a polite request if required, and their comfort level is what we want to be at par with. So we have to pick these things up while we are properly talking to our laptops and our screens. A narrative is on and then it is stopped and then there's a pause, and we pick these things up. And it could be a little overwhelming for one person doing a group, of this nature, especially online. And therefore, we are lucky. What we do is we have two people handling logistics of people entering in or taking out, or things related to the internet and a presentation, etc. And me and my psychologist two together, if one is talking, the other one is playing gatekeeper to what's happening to pick up these observations, And if somebody's video is on and then they seem to be drifting away, wandering away, their attention is evident by its obvious absence, then we try to intervene and bring it back. So I think
absolutely
the challenge on an online platform is also something that comes to the fore.
Absolutely. And again, what you picked up is something is in my closing notes, that what you see is an in-person group filming that we had to do under a lot of restrictions. But so far, every single group that we have, kind of conducted has been online. We also have 2 facilitators per group, and you will see my sort of co-facilitator playing the interventions to avoid part after this one. In addition, we have a psychologist on standby as part of the group in case an individual participant is triggered and needs one-on-one attention, with Mohit, who's right now playing techno, and another staff member taking care of logistics, internet, etc., etc. So what we do request them is to have their screens on, but at any point of time, should they feel comfortable, put their screens off. Screen going off is a cue for the backup psychologist to check in with them. Are you doing okay? Would you like to pause? Would you like to take a break? Would you like for us to speak on a one-on-one? And like you said, you're not only talking to your screens, but you're also talking to your own faces, which poses such a challenge is in terms of catching emotions of sort of people.
One of the advantages that the Zoom has, the breakout room. So if you see someone needing a one-to-one, you can sway them into a breakout room and intervene while the group is still going on. So yeah, we are learning technologically.
Absolutely. In the opening session, if you recall, when I introduced myself as facilitator, I said, I'm Ashish, psychologist from Mind Temple, and my co-facilitator who's actually filming, who you'll see in the next segment. And ladies and gentlemen, the next segment is very critical for a facilitator, because this is interventions to avoid. I understand how you feel. Really? How? Really? Death was a blessing. How do you know it was a blessing? It wasn't a blessing for me because I'm left behind, or my family is left behind. So yes, the person may have been suffering, but from your lens, you're looking at it as a blessing. At least they are not suffering. But I am, right? What about my pain, my hurt? It happened for the best. We hear this all the time. Those who are the favorite of the ones are taken away first. How, in individual therapy as well as group, I've often heard this question that, when someone tells me it happened for the best, I could punch them. It is time to put this behind you. How do you put someone who's been part of your life behind you? You continue to carry them in the future with you in your own unique way. Again, another overrated statement, be strong, without telling you how. You will feel worse before you feel better. Again, another cliche statement, they are in a better place. And I had someone ask someone who told them, I said, how do you know? Do you have a telephone line to check in with them? If yes, please tell me, I'd like to speak to them too. Time heals all wounds. Maybe time may help you carry it better. I don't know about healing all wounds, person's individual journey and narrative. Let's just see through the next section how interventions to avoid in reality. And I'm grateful to Dia, my wonderful co-facilitator in a couple of groups, to have volunteered to do this section. Mohit, we're ready for film section 4, interventions to avoid.
I don't know how will I manage since my children are left alone now. I don't see a future in things. The only option I have is crime. I understand what you're going through. I do. I completely understand what you're going through. How do you?
my friend lost someone as well. So, I do understand what you're going through.
It's just difficult. It's very difficult.
Don't you think it's a little bit of a high time you get over it? Start moving forward with your life for your children.
Tried doing that. It's almost been like 6 months now, and I'm trying each day to move on and become stronger. But it's just not happening. Every day I just find myself in this pit every morning when I wake up. There's nowhere to go.
I want you to forget about it. Forget that it happened. Focus on your children. Focus on the mom that you have to be for them. But that's what it is. So to stop thinking about the past. The more you think what happened in the past, it's just going to get so difficult for you to carry on. You have to move on from this.
How do you do that?
I want you to think of a lot of positive things. What are the positives? Think of a lot of the positives. Maybe then it will get better.
Maybe be grateful for having my children alive.
Stop thinking about it. When you see yourself thinking, just stop thinking about it. Don't engage in the thought.
I've tried that. I've tried stopping me. I've tried distracting myself. I get into activities that take my mind off that, then I get back to it. The moment I find myself, doing nothing,
I understand.
I'm just back at it again. And I can never stop missing him. I can't stop thinking that why it didn't happen to him. There were so many people around. He was a young fellow. He didn't
do it for your children. You're a mother now. You can't keep thinking like this. How are the children going to be if you're thinking like this?
They do look at me when I'm crying and they feel sad about it.
Why are you crying so much? Why are you crying so much? It's been so many months now. Stop crying. You'll be able to move on if you stop crying. Think of the positives, stop crying, and move on.
I tried doing that.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was a brief demonstration of interventions to avoid. For this particular one, I would recommend, if you have any comments, any responses, agreement, disagreement, what would you do differently, if at all? And if not at this stage, sure, maybe at the end. Going to take a moment to see if there's anything anyone has to share, please. Okay, let's come to the closing session and endorsing decompression. Now, at the end of every group, considering it is so heavy, we incorporate mindfulness exercises, grounding exercises, in order to be able to decompress at the end of every session for the participants and for the facilitator. Some of their examples are over here, after which we come to a demonstration of the closing session with a reminder to seek out for individual therapy if required, and a reminder of some of the decompression techniques to take back as they take their journey forward individually. Mohit, next section, closing.
So like we discussed last time, and at the end of every session, we are at the closing session for today. For this group, I was wondering how you feel that this is going to be the last time that we're meeting.
This group has helped me a lot. It has become my safe space to come and share my emotions, share how I'm feeling, without anyone judging me, without anyone putting responsibilities on me. I'm very grateful to have been part of this group, and I will always hold this space with me for my life. So thank you.
I'm so happy you could be part of this group. So much.
Like she said, I always felt like this was my safe space. I could express what I feel and I was not judged for that. And I definitely feel
it's been a journey, to say the least. Over the past 7 weeks, I've definitely, I don't know if my grief has gone down, but I've definitely learned to move with it, even if it's one step at a time.
And your grief may never go down. If you remember the first session we had shared it on, you may learn to carry it better as you embark on this process and through the journey of life. You will carry it better. And that better will be your own perspective, interpretation of what better means. I just want you all to recall and remember the various grounding exercises that we did at the end of every session. Also, the aspect of the letter that we wrote, Dear Me. So please, dear me in a letter periodically. And please reach out for individual support if you feel the need to do so. I'm very grateful to all three of you for allowing me to share this space with you all and to walk this journey, opening up your hearts. Thank you so much.
So ladies and gentlemen, that was a demo of a simulated version of the grief support group process from our experience. Brief in terms of time with technical glitches within the COVID period and so on and so forth. We'd just like to state one more thing that we'd like you to keep in mind, which is red flags. It's important for the facilitator to pay individual attention to the needs of the participants, catching on if there are words that indicate harm, self or others. If there is any comment that points in the direction of suicidal ideation, as well as comparative grief. And like Dr. Fabian earlier on said, and I added on, if a participant is triggered in the session, have 2+ facilitators ensuring one reaches out to them while the session continues. Thank you for your patient listening. Dr. Cheryl, Dr. Fabian, the floor is all to both of you, please. We're going to be opening this section on to question and answer. Dr. Swaminathan, I see you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to say something, sir?
No, I'll talk in the last video.
Okay, all right. All right. Dr. Cheryl, Dr. Fabian, floor is yours.
Yes, Mohit, can you stop sharing so we can then watch everybody full screen? Thank you. Thank you so much, Ashish, for such a really experience. You took us through the various sessions that probably you do in grief support, and I'm sure that all of us who've attended and who are keen to kind of uh, incorporate this or emulate this in our own clinics. I sometimes feel not necessarily having a group, but when you even sometimes I struggle when I do not run a group, but sometimes when I kind of call up somebody who is I am part of tele guide helpline, and I speak to people who've lost someone. I do struggle with what is the right thing to say. And I think that the most important thing to first learn is what not to say, right? Because that I think just completely puts the other person off when we say the wrong things, and we just sometimes I think When we say these wrong things, I don't think it's because we intend to, it's because we don't know what to say. So we just kind of say whatever comes to our mind. And I'm sure all of us have learned a lot. Please use this opportunity. You have such a great speaker who's not only just like Dr. Swaminath said, not just a speaker, he's got such a hands-on experience. So please feel free to ask your questions. You can raise your hands, you can type the questions, and Dr. Fabian and myself will, put forth your questions to Ashish.
And Dr. Fabian will add on because he's got experience too with groups. Also, ladies and gentlemen, comments, suggestions, take backs, please feel free to put them in the chat box if you'd like to.
Madhavi, would you want to ask something or share something?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, we know what to, like, what not to say. We have to make a list of things also, right? According to the situation, what to say, where to use. It's like, it's practice. I know, I understand. As you said, Sharil, at the moment, you don't know what exactly to say. This may work out. This may be soothing for the person who's talking out. That comes up abruptly and like unknowingly. So I think practice is a lot necessary, right? Maybe through the mock sessions or whatever, we need to come up with what to say, especially when something comes up. I was wondering.
Dr. Fabian, would you like to respond to that? And then I could add on.
I think you go first and I'll put in
Okay, sure. So Madhi ma'am, sensitization instead of practice is a term that I would use for myself. After sensitization comes practice. And it's almost like, what we showed on the screen were safe interventions to incorporate or to avoid. Once you're self-aware, then it is a question of self-management and not self-mismanagement. And then you follow your gut based on what you're self-aware about. And also, please cut yourself some slack because there will be times where human beings, we may inadvertently say something that may not go. Like there has been a time when there was a reaction to something I said, and I apologized to the person after the reaction had settled down and also said, that was not my intent, the manner in which you take it. So if you also noted, there was a scene in the film section where there was comparative grief, where I also, as facilitator, shared my reaction. Where I said, when she said that, my heart sank. So to acknowledge the human element and disallow countertransference, So I would say start with sensitization before you go on to practice. Dr. Fabian, and I know Dr. Anjali has joined in. Dr. Anjali, whenever you would like to contribute in, please do. We know you're in a hospital setting at the moment. Dr. Fabian?
Yeah, I think we are all learning, and with each support group, we are, we are better than what we were in the previous one. We have also learned to use music. Like, for example, if we start the group at 7 and we give a leeway of 5 minutes to start at 7:05. Now, sometimes it's a little overwhelming. Everyone is downcast, everyone is quiet, and the silence can be deafening sometimes. Personally, also, I like music, but it also becomes a filler of sorts for people to relate to. So soothing, relaxing music is what we have started before we allow people to enter into the group. And we also gently have learned the art. If you feel people vacillating, lost for words, and you've given time, because we have a time schedule for the group, we politely intervene and take it forward from there. Or people are at a loss for words or are not able to relate further to something, that is where the facilitator and the cross facilitator are working on guard. And you take it further from there. So these are things that we are learning, eventually reiterating time and time again that this is your safe space and feel free. And also what we've realized, telling them time and again that grief is not pathological. It's not a DSM-5 disorder. We are not trying to focus on that way. It's a journey that you're making, and we are just with you on this journey. That is what we have reiterated time and time again. And one more extension of the understanding of grief. Since we are working now in this, we are taking in a lot of learning from not only here, also across the globe. We've also understood that the application of grief loss is not only to life, but also to your mindset or to a job or to a passion that has, has been aborted in some way. So gradually the extension of the application of loss or grief has widened. So that also is something that is helping us.
Ashish, I had a question.
Sorry.
Like sometimes I mean, all of us have experienced grief and loss at different points in our life. And when we are kind of talking to somebody or in a group setting, is it correct to talk, as a facilitator, is it correct to talk about our own loss and how we cope with it? Or should we not kind of bring in that personal story in a group session?
So Dr. Cheryl, I'm going to respond to that. But just before that, Dr. Fabian, thank you for that music bit. I took back something from that. I'm grateful for that. In addition, Madhvi ma'am, what Fabian shared reminded me of a quote, which said, grief is your expression for the love you had for the person you lost. Something that I had quoted last time as well, in case you were there. However, when Dr. Fabian spoke, I was reminded of that for some reason. So Dr. Cheryl, that is such a catch-22 situation. And I will go with a perspective which comes from my American training as well as what I've seen in my Indian work. With my American training, they would say the facilitator does not bring himself or herself personally into the group setting in the context of the group. This is also to avoid countertransference, and countertransference would mean that the facilitator then begins to reflect, simulate, get involved, and then project his feelings or her feelings onto the group participants, requiring then the group participants to take care of the facilitator. However, with my work in India, I've come to realize that at times, sharing a section of your personal narrative may be beneficial as long as you're able to guard against countertransference, which is why I said that's a catch-22 situation. So as long as the facilitator is very, very conscientious about the countertransference factor, does not make then the group about himself or herself, continues to remain focused on the participants, because that's another risk that happens. You take the focus away from the participants and the focus then becomes you, whereas that's not the purpose of the group. So I don't have a yes or a no answer. I mean, Dr. Anjali, if you'd like to add on to that, I would be so appreciative.
Ashish, thanks. Cheryl, thanks. Fabian, nice to see all of you here doing such great work. I think just let me respond to the first question. When Madhvi asked, what do we say? Was it Madhvi who asked that or was it someone else? I think Madhvi asked that question. Yeah. Sometimes it's all right to say that I really do not know how to respond to this. Because we don't have to have answers for everything. We are human, and let the human element flow where it is required. Sometimes it's also our body language that talks more than what we say. And one thing definitely we must do is respect people when they are with us, which I'm sure all of us do, by not getting distracted, because today's world is so distracted that even if I'm sitting in my clinic, either somebody will knock the door or someone will there'll be a telephone ringing. If not the landline, is the mobile, so it's very, very important that when we are working, and especially working with grief, people feel disrespected. And it's very important that if somebody is allowing us entry into this such a private space, I think we need to convey respect to them in whatever way, whether it's verbally, non-verbally. Coming to the second discussion, do we share something personal? Now, of course, we all, try and maintain boundaries. But at the same time, what I have learned in my experience over the last few years is that when you share something personal, okay, I say it, okay, now I'm going to share something personal, and I share it. Okay, now automatically what happens is that you're coming down to the level of the person, because right till now what is happening is that the facilitator is on top as if he or she knows everything or has all the answers, and the person who is feeling the grief is at the bottom. The minute you share something, there is some kind of a strange equality and comfort, and I'm not saying that we start crying on the shoulders, of somebody there, but there's no harm in sharing something and saying that, yes, it took me time too, something like this, which is just communicating the emotion.
Dr. Anjali, thank you so much for those inputs. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Madhvi,
for answering that question.
Madhvi, just if you remember a section in the film which said the group may not have all answers. There was a section that had a subtitle where something was going on, which said the group may not have all answers. It's okay for the group to not have answers. That was the heading. Dr. Cheryl, please.
No, thank you so much for answering that question, and it was really useful. Anybody else has any questions? A lot of appreciation post and thank you on the chat box. Yes, Dr. Swaminath, sorry.
No, I was just wanting to speak about the same thing, self-disclosure. Of course, I have not involved myself in group therapy, but individual therapy we do. And one thing which occurs when you disclose, if you disclose it in a very matter-of-fact way, that is something which I have also gone through and a lot of people do go through. I think it is more easier for patient to accept it and say, rather than like Dr. Anjali said, not necessarily cry on their shoulders, but to acknowledge that these are events which occurs in everybody's life, and these events naturally produce the same amount type of emotional changes which have occurred to you. And I sometimes tell them, but I won't tell you whom I've gone to for help. Just as a to make the thing much lighter, which also tells that there is a possibility that all of us might also require someone else's help if we go through a phase of something like this. So I think self-disclosure, you rightly put it across the American set of training and the Indian set of training. Our Indian patients find themselves much more comfortable, though they view us as God, but they would always prefer you to be one among them rather than, and that strong boundary is something which is very difficult because they generally end up asking how many children you have and things like that, which sometimes would never occur in Americans.
Dr. Swaminathan, I just want to add over here, promise me you won't report me to the APA. The West has lesser heart, the East has more heart.
Okay. So even if you report that, I don't think they'll take it seriously.
Absolutely. I just wanted to share that in our fabulous Indian context.
Anybody else has any comments or any questions?
I want to ask Cheryl, I want to ask the group, because I'm happy that people have come forward. I want to know how many people have actually started groups or are thinking of starting groups. I know Fabian has started, and whether we have more of vernacular groups, because that is the need of the hour today, and I think, of course, we started with adults, but what we are also thinking of starting groups for people who've lost their parents, so if we can all get together and see how many of us are interested, in being a facilitator of groups, or starting something together. I think that is something, if Fabian, Cheryl, if you guys would like to, take on the responsibility.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Anjali. Actually, when we started this journey of having grief counseling together, because of Mind Temple and Mother Trust, like I said, because of the work they were doing, and initially when we had the first workshop, it was more as an introduction to grief therapy. And because of an overwhelming response, people wanted to know, more how to actually conduct it. This workshop was planned. What we want to do in the next step is, and I'm going to kind of allow Dr. Anjali and Dr. Anand Parihar from Mother Trust to talk about it, is that the idea is, like Dr. Anjali said, to have more groups in vernacular languages. Because in metros like Mumbai, we have a lot of groups which happen either in English or in Hindi, but we're really looking forward for collaborations with people who can speak Marathi, Gujarati, Malayalam, Kannada, and like I said, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Anjali in a few seconds about how this collaboration will work, what all hands-on training you will experience. I mean, this was just a general a generic group workshop, and if people are interested, we'll let you know how to collaborate with the main pioneers in this field, so that we can take this forward. Because when you're grieving, you actually sometimes feel very more comfortable to speak in your own language. So a Gujarati auntie, I mean, recently I had a Gujarati patient who lost her son-in-law, and though she could speak Hindi very well, it was not really as effective as I was sure that if she could attend a Gujarati grief support group, it would have helped her more. So I'm just going to share screen. Dr. Anjali, would you want to take this forward and let people know how they can collaborate with you?
So definitely, I think the reason why we also collaborated together is that because we want to take this pan India, pan world, wherever, because COVID has strangely united all of us, and grief is something that people feel in all cultures. And what has happened today is that because of COVID, a lot of people have lost out the opportunity to grieve. So I think this is the time that we can come together and at least help them, because we all know that, yes, if you don't grieve, it can lead to mental health problems. The other aspect is that, we all talk about stigma, going to a psychiatrist. There's so much of stigma. But I think if we are getting a chance of going into the community, and discussing mental health, talking mental health, and also educating people, and helping them through this difficult phase, we must not shy away from that. So I request all those who are interested, and please do not think, don't feel that, oh, I don't know how to do it. When we began, we also did not know, and we learned through sessions. I think after every session, we would all get together and discuss and talk, and also ask each other whether it was okay. So I think let's all learn together. Now, those of you who are interested, in supporting people who want to collaborate, there is an email over here. Just reach out to us, okay, and let's see what we can do. When Madad and Mind Temple collaborated, we did not think or know that today we would be talking to everybody. We started it as an experiment, and I'm sure if we all join hands together, we are going to be able to do lots of things together. So, Cheryl, I think I would end at that and wait for people to reach out, and then let's see what happens next.
Dr. Swaminath, any closing comments?
Nothing except that this was a wonderful session like the earlier one. That was more, principle oriented, whereas this was hands-on experience with very clear do's and don'ts and very operational in the way it was conducted. I only wish the audio was a little better. I think you should go through that audio again and ensure, because I am definite that you will be going through many more such sessions. So the audio of your interviews, I mean the group therapies were would have, I think you will have to upgrade that to something where it will be much more effective. But I thank you, I thank Cheryl for organizing this, I thank Dr. Anjali Chabria and the whole set for both starting this session and giving me an opportunity to chair this session. Thanks a lot.
I would now like to invite the President of Bombay Psychiatric Society, Dr. Avinash D'Souza, to say the vote of thanks.
Well, thank you very much, of course, for having me here. And first of all, a very big thank you to Dr. Cheryl and the entire team of the Indian Psychiatric Society NGO Patient Carers Subcommittee who made this happen. A bigger thank you, of course, to Mind Temple, the entire team from Mind Temple, Madam Anjali Chabria, and of course, our speaker, Ashish Thakur, for today for such an excellent session. A big thank you to our chairperson, Fabian, of course, who's part of BTS as well as the chairperson today, and Dr. Swaminath. It's a pleasure that both of you were here today and chaired this session and made things as beautiful. And of course, the entire team of Bombay Psychiatric Society made this happen. And most importantly, I mean, this was the moment Dr. Cheryl informed me that they wanted to do a program like this. I always, I mean, felt, a program like this is the need of the hour. Fabian himself has done a workshop on grief. I think 2 workshops on grief, if I'm not mistaken. So the thing is, this is something which is an area of interest. I'm not very good, I mean, as a grief therapist, I always say that, I mean, personally, but I always feel there's a huge need for this. So, I mean, I'm very thankful to you all for having made this happen. And more importantly, thankful that you all found it worth your while to have Bombay Psychiatric Society partner with you all. So thank you very much, and over to Cheryl.
Yes, a big thank you, like I said, especially to Mind Temple and Mother Trust for actually spearheading. A big thank you to Ashish Thakur. We can't really, I think you're a rock star. Many times, when I also give talks and people don't ask any questions, I sometimes feel there are 2 reasons why they don't ask questions. Either they have not understood anything or they've understood everything. And I'm sure that this time it's the other way around. They've really understood everything. All the queries have been really, there were no queries because it was so clear and crystal clear. So thank you so much for such a lucid explanation, and those videos were great. Thank you so much, Dr. Swaminath, Dr. Fabian Almeida, for your presence, giving us your time and amazing inputs. Thank you, Bombay Psychiatric Society. Especially thank you to Dr. Priyanka, who really helped in all the Zoom connections, and she was there to start the meeting despite her own busy schedule. So thank you so much, Priyanka. Thank you everyone for joining in. We're really looking forward to seeing that whether you can collaborate. So kindly reach out to Dr. Anjali in the email provided earlier. If you have any doubts, you have our email IDs. You can get in touch with us. Thank you. Stay safe and God bless.
Thanks, Cheryl.